When they had brought their boats to shore, says Luke, they left everything and they followed Jesus. We've come this far by faith, leaning on the Lord, trusting in God's holy word. He's never failed me yet, singing, oh, can't turn around. We've come this far by faith. I spent this last Tuesday and Wednesday interviewing candidates for ordained ministry as part of the New York Conference Board of Ordained Ministry, known affectionately as BOOM. This year we gathered to do all of that interviewing on Zoom in what added up to an 18-hour BOOM Zoom. It was a lot, but of course it was easier on us than on the wonderful poor candidates. One of the first things that candidates for ordination are always asked is to share their call stories, their stories of call to the ministry. Now that's a simple and polite way of asking them, how did you end up here? Whatever gave you the idea that this is what God wants from you? Sometimes these call stories border on the miraculous. Sometimes they're quite mundane, marvelously mundane. Often it's a matter of somebody sometimes saying to them something along the lines of, did you ever think about becoming a pastor? And saying that to them in a way and at a time of their life when that seemed appealing and plausible and possible. Made me think of a comment made to me when I was in the middle of figuring out my own life, my own call, and what to do when I grow up. This is a process that I'm still undergoing. But in the middle of that, a minister friend said to me, if you can think of anything else to do with your life, do that. I couldn't, so I didn't. I thought of that this week when I was listening on the radio to a brief eulogy for Jason Epstein, the founder of the New York Review of Books. Jason Epstein once said, I was recently asked what it takes to become a writer. 3 things. First, one must cultivate incompetence in almost any other form of profitable work. This must be accompanied, second, by a haughty contempt for all the forms of work that one has established that one cannot do anyway. To these 2 must be joined, third, by the nuttiness to believe that other people can be made to care about your opinions and views and be charmed by the way you state them. Now, this formula is not exactly true of a call to ministry, but I have to say it helps to have a little sense of haughty humility combined with not a small amount of lunacy. But to all of that, I think you need to add a sense of immense gratitude to God. What God has been doing in your life. And you have to add an almost insanely optimistic sense of what God might be able to do with the rest of your life. And I think this is present in today's strange call story of Simon Peter, hopeless, hapless Peter and his fellow fisherfolk. Now, had I been serving on St. Peter's ordination interview team, I would have had a few questions for the guy. First, Mr. Simon, can I call you Peter? You gave up a possibly profitable career in the fishing industry to follow around this poor itinerant Torah teacher, going from town to town, begging for your meals. searching for a place to sleep. Okay, interesting life choice, but we'll go with it. Second, you were inspired to do that because this Jesus, who was a carpenter by trade, evidently knew more about how and where to catch fish than you, and your friends did, who did what for a living? Third question. You say this call of yours didn't happen in a nice, appropriate, sacred spot, as it did, for example, with the prophet Isaiah, who received his call in the Jerusalem temple with visions of seraphim chanting, Kadosh, Kadosh, Adonai, Sabayot, holy, holy, holy God of power and might. No? You say it happened in a floundering, fish-filled boat that was threatening to sink into the murky, muddy waters? Okay, right. Fourth question. According to this reference letter from some guy named Luke, Jesus didn't actually call you to follow him, not in so many words. So how did you know you should actually follow him? It just seemed like the right thing to do? And you really didn't know where he was going? That's probably just as well. All of which makes me glad I was not on that interview team, but all of which is to say that it's no doubt a good thing that Peter and his fishing friends didn't have to go through the ordination process of the Board of Ordained Ministry. Still, there are things about this strange story, this call story of Peter's, that seem to ring true in my own life and my own experience. I share Peter's awe at the abundant generosity of the divine, maybe in my case not resulting in that net gain of fish, but certainly resulting in an awareness from time to time of enoughness. A concept that we've been exploring in our Thursday evening Bible study inspired by the Poor People's Campaign. Enoughness. What's enough? What of all our abundance is enough? I share also Peter's gratitude for the grace of Jesus, who sees more in each of us than we sometimes see in ourselves, and for the grace of God, who knows us better than we know ourselves and loves us better than we like ourselves, and who loves us not just as we are, but as we're becoming. And also, I share Peter's faith in the faithfulness of a God who seems to believe that God can do something with me, and that I can do something with God. The thing that has become clear to me in my years of serving on Boom is that God has as many ways of calling people as there are people. And the thing that has become clear to me from my years of serving here as a pastor is that God has a way of calling people into all sorts of vocations and avocations and projects and passions, quite aside from the ordained ministry. And that, if we're paying attention, at whatever stage of life, you may well begin to sense that call on your life. And also, that the call to follow Jesus, to live somehow in the way he lived, to care about the people he cared about, to believe the things he believed, to be called by his name, and to commit to the things that he gave his life for. That call comes to all of us, whatever our career path may be. That comes to all of us. And also, and finally, that all who are called by the name of Jesus, all who call ourselves in some sense Christian, are called to act as if we bear that name in an authentic way, and a faithful way, a way that's authentic to ourselves and faithful to our God. Now, last week I was involved with some friends in a fierce game of competitive charades. One of the titles our team correctly guessed turned out to be the movie Call Me by Your Name. A person from the opposing team at that point said, "Oh, I thought of using that one, but I couldn't think of how to act it out, so I put down Spider-Man instead." But I think the call on all of us who are called by that name, called by the name of Christ, is to figure out how to act that title out in a way that's authentic to us and faithful to the gospel witness of Jesus. How to act that out. It's hard. It's hard sometimes. The call to follow Jesus is a hard call. Dietrich Bonhoeffer famously wrote in The Cost of Discipleship, "When Christ calls a person, he bids them come and die." Peter doesn't quite grasp that part, even when later Jesus tries to make it clear to him that that's the call. Following Jesus was a hard life for Peter and for the other women and men who responded to the call to be disciples of Jesus, to walk along that dusty road with him. Luke tells us that Peter follows Jesus and follows Jesus and follows Jesus almost all the way. Almost. Follows him to Jerusalem, follows him to the Last Supper, to the Garden of Gethsemane, and to Jesus' arrest and trial and captivity. But Peter can't quite make it all the way to the cross. He becomes afraid. Only the women among all the disciples, only the women make it to the cross and to the tomb beyond. A few weeks back, I was supposed to meet Lee and Julia at the top of the 1 train to go with them in order to help them lead a family funeral for our beloved Ressie Mae Bass up in the Bronx. I left with plenty of time to get to 242nd Street, but when the train came to take me there, they announced this train will terminate at 215th Street. Now, 215th Street is a lot closer to the Bronx than 86th Street, so I got on, but I knew that far as we went, I'd somehow have to figure out a way to go a lot further than this train was going to take me. As I sat there, I drew a parallel between my predicament and my spiritual life as a follower of Jesus, as one does. Most days, I feel like I am able to do a lot of what I'm asked to do as a Christian, as a pastor. But most days I'm also pretty aware that I'm not making it all the way. I'm not quite getting there. I'm pretty much a 215th Street Christian. Almost to the Bronx, but not quite. I'm also, most days, kind of a 215th Street pastor. I thought of Ressie as I sat there. I was going to be with her that day when she died, but I didn't make it in time. I know she was okay with that. I know God was okay with that. But still, it felt so much like being a 215th Street pastor rather than a 242nd Street one. And as I sat there traveling north on the number 1 train, I felt the weight of it, because I was now going to be late and cause everybody else to be late to Ressie's funeral. So instead of thinking that, I thought about Peter, making it almost all the way to the cross, but not quite. Of course, Jesus was not done with Peter. Not according to Luke. According to Luke, Jesus has a lot more for Peter to do beyond the cross. Because on Easter morning, according to Luke, when Mary Magdalene and Joanna and Mary, the mother of James, and the other women disciples, the ones who had gone all the way with Jesus to the cross and the tomb, who had made it all the way to 242nd Street, when these women, followers of Jesus, came from the tomb Easter morning with the strange, miraculous news of the resurrection, nobody believed them. Nobody except for Peter. Peter, who ran to the tomb and experienced for himself and experienced for all of us resurrection. As I sat there on the train, thinking about all these things, a funny thing happened. This 215th Street train suddenly announced that we were going all the way up to 242nd Street, all the way up to the Bronx. It was a miracle. It was a miracle. Friends, if you're like me, if you're like me, feeling especially over the last couple of years that it's just hard to live the calling, to follow the one who calls us. If you're feeling like me, like a 215th Street Christian instead of a 242nd Street Christian, welcome to the club. It is a very big club. And Simon Peter was its first member, after all. But as John Wesley kept pointing out, the role of a Jesus follower is to go on to perfection, not to get there. True discipleship is a goal to inspire us, not a destination that we can reach and say, ha, here we are, Jesus. Discipleship is always a journey. And the road goes ever on and on, as the writer and Bible translator J.R.R. Tolkien put it. It goes on for Peter. Luke makes sure we know that when Luke writes the sequel to his gospel, Acts of the Apostles, it co-stars of all people, hopeless, hapless Peter. Peter, who figures out every day how to follow Jesus even when Jesus is gone. Our job, our only job, is to figure out day by day how to do that too, how to follow Jesus even when he's gone, and how to act out our promise to Jesus, our request spoken to Jesus in hope. Call me by your name. Call me by your name. We're not there yet. We're not all the way there. But I know this, we have come this far by faith. We've come this far by faith, leaning on the Lord, trusting in God's holy word. God's never failed me yet, singing, oh, can't turn around. We've come this far by faith. We've come this far by faith, leaning on the Lord, trusting in God's holy word. God's never failed.